Most of your suffering didn't come from people. It came from the version of them you built inside your own mind. That sentence will make sense in a way you're not ready for by the time this is over. There's a story Carl Jung rarely told openly. A woman came to him one afternoon, not crying loudly, not shaking. She sat across from him with the quiet devastation of someone whose entire inner world had just collapsed without warning. She kept repeating the same sentence again and again in a voice that had lost its emotion entirely. "I don't understand how they could do this to me." She wasn't grieving a lie. She wasn't mourning a betrayal in the ordinary sense. She was mourning something far more painful. The complete dissolution of a person who had never truly existed. Not in reality, only inside her. And Jung sat with her in that silence and noticed something that would define much of his life's work. The agony wasn't arriving from what had actually happened. It was arriving from the wreckage of a fantasy. A carefully constructed, deeply beloved, completely fictional version of a real human being, built entirely from her own longing, her own hope, her own desperate need to believe that someone was exactly what she needed them to be. This is where most people's pain actually begins. Not in betrayal, in projection. Because the human mind does something quietly dangerous when it encounters someone it admires, desires, fears, or loves. It doesn't wait for evidence. It fills the silence. You meet someone who carries themselves with confidence, and without realizing it, your mind immediately assumes they must be trustworthy. You meet someone whose presence feels warm and familiar, and your mind starts scripting entire chapters of a relationship that exists only in imagination. You encounter someone who understands you deeply once, just once, and suddenly your psyche begins constructing a complete human being around that single moment. A human being who was never truly there. Carl Jung. Philosophy exists to bring you the kind of psychological truth that most people spend entire lifetimes running from. And this is one of the most important ones. Most people are not in relationships with other people. They are in relationships with projections of other people. And reality, when it finally arrives, doesn't knock. It enters like a blade. Not loudly, quietly, in the delayed reply that carries an entirely different energy than before. In the disrespect wrapped so carefully inside humor that you almost mistake it for affection. In the sudden emotional distance that appears precisely the moment you stop being useful. In that strange, hollow feeling that someone only truly values your presence when you are emotionally available to serve their needs. You've felt this before. Most people have. That slow, creeping realization that the version of someone living inside your mind, the one you speak to in your thoughts, the one you defended to others, the one you stayed for, feels warmer, more consistent, more real than the actual human being standing in front of you. Drop in the comments, "I am waking up to the truth of who I really am." That realization doesn't leave you unchanged, because once your perception shifts, you begin noticing something deeply unsettling about human behavior in general. People perform, constantly, differently depending on the audience, the context, the social reward available in that particular moment. The loyal friend you believed you knew becomes an entirely different person in a different room. The individual who insisted they valued honesty above everything becomes defensive, then hostile the moment genuine honesty is directed at them. The person who expressed love with such apparent conviction withdraws that love the instant the emotional transaction stops benefiting them. And the part that disturbs most people when they first truly see it, the part that makes this so much harder to process, is that most of these people are not consciously performing. They genuinely believe they are who they appear to be. They are convinced the mask is the face. Carl Jung spent decades studying what he called the shadow, the hidden, unacknowledged dimension of the human personality. Every element of ourselves we find unacceptable, every impulse we refuse to consciously own, every truth about our inner world we cannot bear to examine directly. Jung believed that the more aggressively a person avoids confronting their shadow, the more artificial and hollow their visible personality eventually becomes. This is why certain people begin to feel strangely empty the longer you know them. The performance develops cracks. The mask slips. Not dramatically, not in a single moment of revelation, but in brief, almost imperceptible flashes. 1 second of something genuine surfaces beneath the charm and disappears again. The insecurity living underneath the confidence. The envy concealed beneath the supportive words. The need for control carefully disguised as affection. People are not afraid of being seen. They are afraid of being seen completely. And perhaps this is why the moment you stop romanticizing people feels so profoundly disorienting. Because it forces you to confront something you would rather not examine. How much of your own suffering was constructed by your own mind? How much of the pain you carried was created not by who people actually were, but by who you needed them to be? After that realization takes root, something fundamental begins shifting in the way you observe human behavior. You stop listening exclusively to words, because words are the easiest thing to perform. You begin studying patterns, and patterns carry a different kind of information entirely. You notice how some people only become affectionate when they sense you withdrawing. How respect surfaces only after distance is established. How attention intensifies precisely the moment you stop pursuing it. You begin to understand something uncomfortable. Human behavior is, at its core, deeply reactive. Most people do not value what is consistently present. They value what feels uncertain, difficult to secure, potentially disappearing. This is why genuine kindness, freely given, unconditional, without the protection of clearly established limits, is so frequently taken for granted until it disappears entirely. Kindness without boundaries doesn't teach people to appreciate you. It quietly teaches them how to use you. And the truly unsettling recognition is how early this conditioning begins forming. Think back to early environments, school, family, the first social structures most people ever navigated. The quietest individual in the room became the target not because of anything they did, but simply because they demonstrated a willingness to absorb disrespect without consequence. The most confident person received admiration despite treating others with consistent carelessness. The one who sacrificed most reliably for everyone around them slowly became invisible, as though human beings unconsciously organized themselves around demonstrations of power long before they develop any sophisticated understanding of morality. Jung believed that what individuals cannot accept within themselves gets directed outward, projected onto others with remarkable psychological force. Once you genuinely understand how projection operates, ordinary social interaction becomes something almost psychologically disturbing to observe. The deeply insecure person accuses others of seeking attention. The chronically dishonest individual becomes obsessed with loyalty. The most controlling people in any room describe themselves as protectors. Those most terrified by the prospect of abandonment frequently become the ones who suffocate others emotionally, driving away the very connection they are desperate to preserve. Everyone eventually exposes themselves, not through confession, through repetition. Write in the comments, "I see patterns now that I can never unsee." This is what genuine awareness does to your relationships. You stop evaluating isolated incidents in isolation. You begin observing behavior as a cumulative pattern across time, and consistency has a way of making reality impossible to deny. The friend who reaches out exclusively during their own emotional crises and vanishes during yours. The person who somehow transforms every conversation into a subtle competition. The relationship where vulnerability, offered in trust, later becomes weaponized. At first, these recognitions produce pain, because the mind instinctively defends the people it has invested emotion into. The rationalizations arrive immediately. They're overwhelmed right now. That wasn't what they meant. That's simply the way they are. But eventually, beneath the rationalizations, a quieter and more dangerous question begins forming. What if you have been translating disrespect into misunderstanding for years? Not because you genuinely believed it, but because the alternative required you to acknowledge a loss you weren't prepared to face. That question dismantles something fundamental, because it reveals that many relationships survive not through love, but through denial. Denial performs remarkable maintenance work on connections that have long since lost their foundation. It keeps families functioning through patterns that would otherwise be impossible to sustain. It keeps toxic dynamics alive for years, sometimes for entire lifetimes. It keeps people emotionally attached, sometimes desperately so, to individuals who have already stopped genuinely valuing them. Most relationships don't end when respect dissolves. They end when awareness arrives. And awareness creates a particular kind of distance, not always physical, psychological. You begin feeling genuinely detached in conversations that once carried significant meaning. Certain compliments start landing differently, transactional rather than sincere. Certain gestures of affection begin registering as strategic. You stop being hypnotized by charm And once that capacity for hypnosis disappears, the underlying mechanics of social interaction become impossible to ignore. You observe how groups unconsciously penalize authenticity, how people become visibly uncomfortable when someone refuses to perform their expected role, how genuine honesty destabilizes entire social structures built on carefully maintained collective fiction. Because most social systems are not fundamentally constructed on truth. They are constructed on mutual agreement, a shared, unspoken compact to avoid naming what everyone already perceives. The person who breaks that compact first becomes the problem. This is the strange consequence of seeing reality with genuine clarity. You become considerably more difficult to manipulate, but you also become more difficult to belong to groups, to communities, to the ordinary rhythms of social connection that most people navigate without much conscious examination. Because once you stop romanticizing people, you begin perceiving how extensively social life depends on performance. Status shifts human behavior in ways most people prefer not to acknowledge. The insecure become excessively agreeable around authority. The confident become dismissive around perceived weakness. Even moral positions shift according to available social reward. Someone publicly condemns betrayal while engaging in private betrayal with complete psychological ease. Someone constructs an elaborate image of honesty while carefully managing every perception of themselves for maximum control. And most disturbing of all, most people doing these things have no conscious awareness that they're doing them. Jung understood something genuinely brutal about the mechanics of human nature. The ego will protect its own image at nearly any cost. People require the belief that they are fundamentally good people. So rather than confronting the darkness within themselves directly, they construct sophisticated explanations that reframe it. Cruelty becomes honesty. Manipulation becomes caring. Control becomes protection. Jealousy becomes genuine concern. The human mind is extraordinarily skilled at concealing its true motivations, especially from itself. This is why some of the most psychologically dangerous people you will ever encounter are not the openly malicious ones. They are the individuals who are completely and sincerely convinced of their own innocence. The friend who consistently diminishes you while framing it as looking out for your best interests. The partner who manufactures guilt around your most basic needs for space and individuality. The person who generates ongoing emotional chaos and then positions themselves as the wounded party when you react to it. They drain your energy and your clarity while maintaining, with total apparent sincerity, the identity of victim. Victimhood itself can become a form of power, and the moment you understand that fully, your perception of human interaction changes in ways that cannot be reversed. Comment below. I trust my own perception more than I trust performed innocence. You stop focusing primarily on what people say. You begin asking a more revealing question with everything you observe. What emotional outcome does this person actually want from me? That question cuts through performance with a precision that words never can. Some want admiration. Some want obedience. Some want emotional dependence, a dynamic where your need for them anchors your behavior in their favor. Some simply want proximity to someone they perceive as beneath them, because that proximity temporarily quiets their own unacknowledged feelings of inadequacy. People rarely seek connection with the purity they claim. More often, they seek regulation, a way to manage the internal emptiness they cannot face in solitude. This is where the illusion of romantic love also begins to fracture. Because many relationships are not fundamentally built on love. They are built on unconscious psychological agreements, transactional at their core, even when neither person has the self-awareness to recognize it. I will make you feel valuable if you make me feel wanted. I will be your stability if you never threaten my need for control. I will offer you admiration if you protect me from the specific loneliness I cannot tolerate alone. This is why people shift so dramatically when the emotional transaction changes. Not because they transformed overnight, because the mask was always attached to a condition. And conditions eventually surface. You can observe this most clearly in the moments that genuinely test human nature: success, failure, or transformation. Achieve something significant, and envy that was previously invisible begins surfacing in people you believed were in your corner. Become genuinely vulnerable, and hidden contempt emerges. Establish limits around your time and energy, and hidden entitlement appears with a force that can be genuinely shocking. Nothing exposes human nature with more efficiency than changing the role people had unconsciously assigned to you. The quiet person who develops confidence. The agreeable person who begins saying no. The wounded person who starts genuinely healing. Suddenly, the people who claimed to love them become visibly uncomfortable. Not always loudly, often in subtle withdrawal, in slight shifts of energy, in the specific kind of distance that communicates without saying anything directly. Because some relationships were built, unconsciously, invisibly, around your limitation, around your need, around your wound. People don't always love who you are becoming. Sometimes they love who you were when you were more manageable. Drop in the comments, "I am becoming who I was always meant to be, and I release what cannot grow with me." And that realization, when it fully arrives, doesn't produce hatred. It removes fantasy. Once the fantasy dissolves, loneliness begins feeling qualitatively different. Not heavier, sharper, more honest. You begin understanding the significant difference between being surrounded by people and being genuinely understood by them. Some of the most profoundly isolated people alive have constantly active phones, full social calendars, conversations every single day. But no one in their life truly perceives them beyond their utility, their identity, or the expectation they were assigned. You may have felt this without knowing how to articulate it. That particular exhaustion after extended social interaction, not physical tiredness, but something more like psychological depletion. The sensation of having been fully present in body while something essential remained hidden, protected, unshared. Hours of performing a version of yourself carefully calibrated to maintain everyone else's comfort, while the actual self remained somewhere unreachable beneath the performance. Jung understood this burden. He believed the heaviest thing a child carries is the unlived life of the parents, the accumulated weight of authentic selfhood that was suppressed in favor of what was socially acceptable, what was emotionally safe, what was rewarded. But this pattern doesn't remain in childhood. It follows people into every relationship, every social structure, every version of adulthood they construct. Society rewards the mask early and consistently. Be agreeable, be attractive, be successful, be useful, be emotionally digestible. Slowly, without any single decisive moment of choice, people stop asking themselves who they genuinely are. They begin asking a more socially practical question. What version of me receives the most acceptance? And once a person builds their identity around the answer to that question, authenticity begins to feel genuinely threatening. Not to them, to the people around them. Because a person who no longer needs external validation to feel stable is extraordinarily difficult to control. A person genuinely comfortable with solitude is nearly impossible to manipulate through fear of abandonment. A person who can perceive emotional games clearly stops feeding them. And the social environment registers this immediately, even when no one acknowledges it openly. This is why some people lose significant relationships after genuine growth. After becoming more emotionally independent, more self-directed, more psychologically grounded. The insecure friend feels the comparison. The controlling partner loses the leverage. The person who needed your constant reassurance finds you are no longer reliably available in that way. And beneath all of this sits a truth that most people actively avoid confronting. That many relationships are held together less by love and more by unconscious mutual dependency. One person requires admiration, the other requires purpose. One needs emotional rescue, the other needs to feel essential. The system functions with surprising stability until one person evolves. Then it begins developing fractures in unexpected places because genuine awareness dismantles unconscious agreements. Right below, I choose conscious connection over comfortable dependency. This is why healing can feel socially dangerous in ways that make no immediate sense. When you stop accepting disrespect as the price of belonging, people with manipulative tendencies describe you as selfish. When you stop over-explaining your decisions and boundaries, insecure people experience your clarity as coldness. When you stop chasing approval, certain people lose interest with a completeness that initially stings until you understand it. Not because you became worse, because your role changed. And most human relationships are far more role-dependent than people want to acknowledge. The moment you stop performing the assigned role, the funny one, the strong one, the perpetual listener, the selfless helper, people respond as though you violated something binding, because in their internal experience, you did. The genuinely terrifying recognition is that very few people actually want complete authenticity from those around them. Complete authenticity disrupts social equilibrium in ways that feel threatening. Imagine if everyone around you openly acknowledged their jealousy, their insecurity, their need for validation, their hidden resentment, their fear of being abandoned, their desire for control. Most relationships would not survive that weight. So society sustains itself through partial truth, carefully managed presentations, mutual avoidance of the things everyone already perceives. And the person who begins seeing through this clearly goes through a psychological transformation that is, in some ways, irreversible. They stop feeling surprise at human behavior. They begin understanding it. And understanding human nature too deeply carries a particular temptation: detachment. Not the peaceful, grounded kind, the cold kind. The kind that begins anticipating manipulation before it encounters kindness. That starts expecting self-interest before loyalty. That reaches for cynicism as though it were wisdom. At first, it feels like clarity, like finally being awake. But this is the point where many people fundamentally misunderstand what Jung was actually teaching. Because seeing the darkness in other people is only the beginning of the journey. The genuinely difficult part, the part that requires real courage, begins when you recognize the same darkness within yourself. That moment arrives quietly. You notice yourself experiencing satisfaction at someone else's difficulty. You catch yourself withholding affection to re-establish a sense of control. You observe yourself performing confidence while concealing fear. You find yourself pretending not to care about something that matters deeply, because caring feels dangerous. And suddenly, the image of yourself as different, as more aware, more evolved, more conscious than the people you've been observing, begins fracturing. That is the shadow Jung described with such precision. Not evil, hidden humanity. The aspects of yourself you excised from your self-concept because they felt unacceptable. The jealousy, the neediness, the ego, the desire for dominance, the wish to be chosen, to be valued above others, the capacity for manipulation you prefer not to acknowledge. Most people spend entire lifetimes pretending these elements don't exist within them. But suppression doesn't extinguish darkness. It buries it living. And what is buried alive influences everything from beneath, emerging as passive aggression, as emotional control, as the subtle cruelty of withheld support, as judgment that presents itself as moral clarity. The more desperately innocent someone needs to appear, the more carefully their shadow should be observed. Because genuine self-awareness doesn't produce the performance of perfection, it produces humility. A person who has actually confronted their shadow understands what they are capable of under sufficient pressure. They understand that morality is far more conditional than civilization prefers to admit. Place enough fear, humiliation, loneliness, or desire into any human being, and behavior changes more quickly than most people can tolerate knowing about themselves. History has demonstrated this without ambiguity. Ordinary people become capable of cruelty. Loyal people betray. Honest people construct elaborate deceptions. Kind people participate in dehumanization when social reward makes it available. Most individuals are not stable moral identities. They are psychologically adaptive creatures responding to conditions. And once you absorb that reality, your perception of human nature loses its simplicity permanently. You stop sorting humanity into clear categories of good and evil. You begin perceiving wounded egos, unexamined fears, unresolved shame, survival patterns dressed as character. You begin seeing people as psychologically fragmented, including yourself. That recognition is uncomfortable in the specific way that only truth can be uncomfortable. It destroys moral fantasy, the fantasy that you would reliably choose correctly under any conditions, the fantasy that love automatically purifies, the fantasy that awareness alone provides immunity from darkness. It doesn't. Awareness gives you something more honest than immunity. It gives you a choice, a real one, made consciously, in full knowledge of what you're capable of and what you're choosing not to be. Most people are governed by patterns they have never examined, but the person who confronts their shadow begins perceiving those patterns in real time. The urge to manipulate rather than communicate directly. The urge to seek validation rather than build genuine confidence. The urge to punish rejection through withdrawal or silence. The urge to maintain control through guilt. And for the first time, they understand something that the unconscious person never reaches. Human beings are far less rational than they claim to be. Most behavior is emotional survival wearing the clothing of reason. After that understanding settles, the world grows quieter. Not calmer, quieter. You stop expecting people to become who they perform themselves to be. You stop feeling surprise when admiration shifts into envy under pressure, when loyalty bends under sufficient strain, when affection disappears the moment convenience disappears with it. You become more observant than reactive. You notice how aggressively people attempt to flee from themselves, through constant noise, through relationship drama, through status pursuit, through the relentless stimulation of social media and substances and endless performance. Anything to avoid sitting long enough in silence to hear the actual contents of their own mind. Because silence demands confrontation, and confrontation is most terrifying for the person whose entire identity is constructed around external approval. Jung once said something that Carl Jung philosophy returns to again and again because it captures something essential. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Most people have no genuine sense of how much of their personality operates on automation. They believe they chose their relationships, but they unconsciously repeated the attachment dynamics formed in their earliest years. They believe they have persistent bad fortune with people, but they systematically disregard every warning signal because the familiar pattern, even when painful, feels more psychologically comfortable than the unknown. They believe everyone eventually betrays them, and they build lives that confirm this belief by seeking out the dynamic that produced it originally. Human beings don't simply seek happiness. They seek familiarity. Even familiarity that hurts them. Even familiarity that diminishes them. This is why people return to relationships that have already demonstrated their capacity for damage. The pain is familiar. Familiarity creates psychological safety even when it creates psychological harm. And this is why change is resisted with such force. Change threatens the identity structure. A person who has organized their self-concept around being a victim experiences healing as a form of self-dissolution. A person who built their sense of worth around being needed finds boundaries feel genuinely dangerous. A person who survived through control finds vulnerability unbearable to contemplate. Most people are not protecting truth. They are protecting the architecture of identity they built in response to early pain. Once you understand this, you stop absorbing certain behaviors as personal. The disrespect, the projection, the emotional inconsistency, the subtle punishments. Most of it was never fundamentally about you. You encountered someone at a point where your presence, your confidence, your growth, your independence triggered something in them they were working actively to avoid confronting. And rather than face what you reflected in them, they redirected it toward you. Sometimes your stability reminds someone of their own fragmentation. Sometimes your clarity threatens someone whose sense of self depends on your confusion. Sometimes your growth simply illuminates another person's chosen stagnation. And you feel these responses. Once perception sharpens, you begin sensing tension beneath the politeness, competition beneath the praise, resentment beneath the friendliness. The performance becomes transparent. And that transparency can become isolating if it isn't handled with care. Because eventually, a question forms that can function like poison in the mind. If everyone is performing, is genuine connection even real? Jung believed the answer was neither naive nor cynical. The goal was never to return to illusion. The goal was also never to sink into cold, armored detachment. The goal was consciousness, the capacity to see human nature with clarity while retaining your own humanity intact. To understand why people do what they do without losing your ability to remain open, to remain present, to remain genuinely connected. That balance is rarer than almost anything else in human experience. Because once you truly perceive reality, you cannot return to illusion. You understand why certain conversations feel empty despite their surface warmth. Why certain forms of affection register as transactional. Why some people love only the parts of you that serve them. And why beneath virtually all of it, almost everyone is waging a private psychological war they rarely have language for. But here is what matters most, and what Carl Jung philosophy wants you to carry with you beyond this video. The masks were never the fundamental problem. The problem was the belief that they were permanent, that people were fixed, that reality was settled. Human beings are genuinely conflicted, capable of profound love and calculated manipulation, of fierce loyalty and quiet betrayal, of extraordinary compassion and casual cruelty, sometimes within the span of an hour. And perhaps maturity begins precisely at the moment you stop searching for people who are without contradiction and begin seeing people as they actually are: fragmented, wounded, performing, afraid, doing the best they can with the psychological resources available to them, and sometimes failing in ways that cause real harm, including yourself. The day you stop romanticizing people is not a day of loss. It is the day your vision finally comes into genuine focus. Not optimistic, not pessimistic. Clear. And clarity changes the quality of everything. How you walk through the world, who you allow close, how you receive what people offer, how you protect what is genuinely valuable about yourself. You become slower to extend trust, and considerably deeper when you do. Harder to manipulate through performance, but more honest with yourself about your own. Less dependent on attention, less hypnotized by charm, less willing to silence your own perception simply to preserve someone else's comfort. Because now you understand something that most people spend their entire lives arranging their experience to avoid understanding. The greatest threat was never that other people could deceive you. It was that your own longing, your own hope, your own carefully constructed projections could deceive you first, and most completely. And once you genuinely understand that, human nature stops feeling like a betrayal. It simply feels human. If this reached something real in you, something you've felt but never had language for, drop in the comments, "I see